In this video, we're going to use Excel to calculate the correlation coefficient. We're going to put it. We're going to get the correlation. We're going to put it in this cell over here. Let's look and see which function we would use. We'll go to Statistical, and we'll come down and find Correl. Looks promising. Returns a correlation coefficient between two data sets. Let's use that one. So we're going to correlate vitreous chamber depth and anterior chamber depth. Correlation goes from -1 through 0 to +1. 0 is no correlation between the two variables, and -1 is a negative correlation, meaning an inverse. As one goes up, the other goes down. And +1 is a perfect positive correlation. As one goes up, the other goes up. So let's look at vitreous chamber depth. I'm going to do Control Shift down arrow. And I need to do this. Unfortunately, this stops at every point there's missing data. And I go all the way to the bottom to make sure I get everybody and then come back up. So that's array 1. And then we'll just come over to here. Now I could, because there's a fair amount, not a huge amount of missing data, I could copy this and paste it because it's right next and replace the I with a J. And then okay. And so our correlation is 0.269. So that's positive correlation. And let's try the same thing for, and this is VCD against ACD, anterior chamber depth. Let's look at lens thickness and axial length. Let's copy this cell. Actually, we'll just drag it down to the next one. Now, what is that a copy of? That just takes this and goes down one. We want to do lens thickness and axial length. This moves our range to that point. We hit enter, and we notice now we have a negative correlation. So what do these things look like when we graph them, so we can get kind of a feel for what it is we're looking at? So you would think vitreous and chamber depth and anterior chamber depth, as the eye grows, they would be correlated with each other. Let's look at, we're going to highlight, Control Shift down arrow, then comma, then we come up and mark the other column for ACD, Control Shift down arrow, close parenthesis. So we have our function, it's Correl I2 to I641, and the other variable anterior chamber depth is J2 to J641, close parenthesis. So we have these two arrays within correlation, and that gives us a correlation of 0.26. Now that's a positive correlation. Let's see what that relationship looks like. So let's highlight a VCD and ACD, move up at the top, and to show it, what we want to do is insert a graph. So let's insert a Scatterplot. All these are the graphs, the possible graphs that you can hit. There's bar and column, column and bar and star and all kinds of things. We want to do the scatter graph. And we'll do points, and there is a scatter graph of vitreous chamber depth by anterior chamber depth. Now that's a blob of points. It's hard to tell what's what. So what we want to do is alter the axes, these axes, so that the points are spread out a little bit more. So we're going to double click on the axis. So like get your cursor over the 15 and double click. What that does is it opens up a menu over here. And the axis options, we can see the minimum is currently 0. Let's make that about 14. See how that does. That spreads out our x-axis. Now let's do the same thing. Pick a spot, let's say 250. It doesn't matter which number, you're just going to double click to pull up the appropriate chart. So this goes 0 to 5. Let's make it 2.5. Now you've been taught probably to always start your scales at 0. But really, it doesn't make a lot of sense to start at an unrealistic number. When you're talking about budgets and people look at money can go from 0 to something. That makes some sense. But when you're talking about, in this case, vitreous and anterior chamber depths, a chamber depth of 0 is an unrealistic number. So you can give it a scale that's a certain range. Now our correlation, as we had shown before, was a positive 0.26. So these points are kind of going in an uphill direction, but there is a lot of noise. So 26 is not a real strong correlation. So a 17 vitreous chamber depth can be anywhere from an anterior chamber depth of 3.2 up to 4.6. So when we do our charts, we can do a couple of things. One, you don't really need a chart table because when you plot something or when you insert your graph into your paper, you usually give it a caption or a title, a figure title, that will describe the figure. You can put in a chart table if you want. But to give the axes titles, we come over here to Design, click on the Design tab. Then we see over here we can add a chart element. And there's a number of elements that we can add. Right now we're going to do an axis title. Now let's do primary horizontal. You do that, you click up here in this space. You could click down here where it says axis title and type in something, but you can also click up here. And this is vitreous chamber depth. And then you put in parenthesis the unit measurement. Okay, and hit enter. And then let's add another vertical chart element, primary vertical. Notice it puts it in writing sideways. And this is going to be anterior chamber depth in millimeters. So there's our graph. So we can view what a 0.2674 correlation looks like.